In 1936, on a small farm outside Intercourse, Pennsylvania, an Amish farmer, named by his neighbors simply as Old Jacob, mixed together something in a wooden bucket that would have made the executives at any modern pesticide company deeply uncomfortable if they had known about it, which, eventually, they did. And according to industry archives from the mid-20th century, what followed was not admiration. It was a very deliberate, very well-funded effort to make sure that what Old Jacob knew, and what every Amish grower in Lancaster County had known for generations, would be buried under a mountain of branded bottles, quarterly profits, and government-approved labels. This video is about what was in that bucket. It is about why it worked then, why it still works now, and why the people who profit from your garden's problems spent decades making sure you would never think to make it yourself. Before we go any further, here is the question that is going to stay with you for the next 20 minutes. What is the one ingredient in this 1936 Amish spray that modern chemistry has never been able to replicate synthetically, not because they could not figure it out, but because there is absolutely no money in selling you something you can find for free in your own kitchen or barn? Hold that question. The answer is coming, and when it arrives, it is going to reframe everything you thought you knew about the aphid problem in your garden. Aphids. If you have fruit trees, a vegetable patch, any kind of summer garden at all, you already know what they do. They colonize the soft new growth on your plants, the tender tips of your tomatoes, the undersides of your squash leaves, the young shoots of your apple trees. They pierce the tissue and drink the sugars the plant spent weeks producing. A large enough colony can stunt a plant in days. And here is what is important to understand from a purely mechanical standpoint. Aphids reproduce asexually under the right conditions. One female can produce up to 80 live offspring per week without any male involvement whatsoever. By the time you see them with the naked eye in numbers that concern you, you are already dealing with the third or fourth generation of an infestation that started with a handful of individuals. The modern answer to this problem, the answer the industry has been selling you since roughly 1947, involves a class of compounds called organophosphates. The story of how those compounds came to dominate the American garden is not a pretty one, and it connects directly to something that happened in the years immediately following World War II. But that story belongs to the second part of this video. Because before you understand what replaced the old method, you need to understand what the old method actually was, where it came from, who kept it alive, and what makes it work on a level that no synthetic compound has ever truly matched. The Amish communities of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, have been farming North American soil continuously since the early 1700s. That is not a romantic exaggeration. That is a documented historical fact supported by land records, church histories, and the academic work of researchers like Donald Craybill and John Hostetler, who spent decades studying these communities from the inside. What Craybill documented, particularly in his work on Amish society and agriculture, is that these communities function as living libraries. When a practice works, genuinely works, across seasons, across generations, across the variability of weather and soil, it does not get discarded. It gets passed down with the same seriousness as a deed to land or a recipe for preserving meat. The spray that Old Jacob mixed in 1936 was not something he invented. It was something he had learned from his father, who had learned it from his father before him. In the Amish oral tradition of Lancaster County, recipes like this one were considered household knowledge, the kind of thing every farm wife and every grower knew by heart, the way your grandmother knew her pie crust, without ever consulting a recipe card. The specific formulation that has been documented by agricultural historians working in Pennsylvania Amish country involves a combination of raw apple cider vinegar, water, a small amount of dish soap, or, in older versions, rendered lard soap, and a particular additive that the Amish derived from one of the most overlooked plants in their kitchen gardens. That plant is going to matter enormously in a few minutes. Picture the farm for a moment. It is early summer in Lancaster County. The light is long and warm, the kind of late afternoon gold that turns the fields into something almost painted. You can smell the soil, that deep, dark, slightly sweet smell that healthy earth has when it has been worked and composted for generations without a drop of synthetic nitrogen. A horse and buggy moves down a gravel lane between two fields. An older man in a broad-brimmed hat walks slowly along a row of apple trees running his hand along the bark, turning over a leaf here and there with the practiced unhurry of someone who has done this 10,000 times. He is not looking for the aphids with alarm. He is checking to see if it is time to spray. And if it is, he knows exactly what to make, how to make it, and why it works. That knowledge, the why it works, is precisely what the industry did not want you to inherit. If you have a garden and you are tired of buying something new every season to deal with a problem your grandfather handled for free, drop a number in the comments right now. Drop 47. Or better yet, drop the state you are gardening in. Let's find out how many of us are out here. Because this channel exists for exactly that reason, to show you that the knowledge your grandfather had was not primitive. It was sophisticated. It was just never profitable enough for someone to sell you. Now let us talk about what is actually in the spray and why it kills aphids with a speed and completeness that most commercial products struggle to match. The foundation is acidity. Raw apple cider vinegar, not the pasteurized, filtered, clear kind you see in supermarket bottles, but the unfiltered, unpasteurized kind with the mother still in it, has a pH of roughly 3 to 4. Aphids, like all soft-bodied insects, are extraordinarily sensitive to changes in the pH environment on the surface of a leaf. Their respiratory system, such as it is, relies on spiracles, tiny pores along the sides of their abdomen through which they breathe. An acidic solution applied directly to those spiracles disrupts the osmotic balance of the insect's body fluids almost immediately. This is not a slow poison. This is a direct physical disruption. Within minutes, a properly formulated acidic spray causes the aphid's cellular fluids to destabilize. It is not metaphorical. It is simple biology. The second component, the soap, whether the modern dish variety or the old rendered lard soap the Amish used well into the 20th century, serves two functions simultaneously. First, it breaks the surface tension of the water, allowing the spray to penetrate the waxy coating that aphids carry on their bodies. Without a surfactant, a water-based spray will beat up and roll off the insect like rain off a wax car. The soap eliminates that protection. Second, the soap itself, particularly the fatty acid compounds in a true soap, as distinct from a synthetic detergent, clogs those same spiracles we just discussed. You are attacking the aphid's ability to breathe from two directions at once. The acid destabilizes the cellular environment. The fatty acid physically blocks the airway. This is why the Amish spray worked in minutes rather than days. But here is what the industry spent decades hoping you would never figure out. Neither of those two components is the most important part of the formulation. They are the delivery mechanism. The active agent, the ingredient that gives this spray its specific, targeted, generational effectiveness, is the botanical extract that the Amish added to the base mixture. And it comes from a plant that every single person watching this video either grows in their garden or could grow in a pot on their back porch without spending a dime. That plant is garlic. Specifically, a concentrated garlic extract made by crushing raw garlic cloves and steeping them in water for 24 to 48 hours before straining. The active compound in raw garlic is allicin, produced when aline, a sulfur-containing amino acid stored in the garlic cell, comes into contact with the enzyme allinase, which is released when the cell is damaged. Crush a garlic clove and within seconds you have allicin, one of the most powerfully antimicrobial and insect-repellent compounds found in any edible plant. Allicin does not merely repel aphids, it disrupts their nervous system at the chemical level, interfering with the acetylcholinesterase enzymes that regulate nerve signal transmission in insects. In concentrated form, in direct contact, it is lethal. At lower concentrations, it acts as a powerful deterrent, altering the chemical signature of the plant surface so that aphids, which navigate and colonize by detecting specific volatile compounds, simply cannot orient themselves properly. Let that sit for a moment. The Amish were using a botanical nerve agent derived from a kitchen crop in 1936. And the mode of action blocking acetylcholinesterase is chemically identical, in principle, to the mechanism of the organophosphate pesticides that the petrochemical industry began selling to American farmers and gardeners in the late 1940s. The difference is that the Amish version is free, is safe to handle, breaks down within hours, leaving no residue on your fruit, and has been refined through generations of practical observation in some of the most productive small-scale orchards and kitchen gardens in North America. The organophosphate version requires a hazmat label. Now, here is where the historical record gets uncomfortable for some very powerful people. The story of how organophosphate pesticides entered American agriculture is inseparable from the story of World War II and what happened to the chemical industry after 1945. During the war, the United States government invested enormous resources in developing nerve agents, specifically compounds that disrupted the acetylcholinesterase function in human nervous systems. When the war ended, those chemical manufacturing facilities did not go dark. The companies that had built them, and this is documented in post-war industrial history, needed a new market for the manufacturing infrastructure they had created. The conversion of wartime nerve agent chemistry into peacetime pesticide chemistry is not a conspiracy theory. It is an industrial transition that has been written about openly by agricultural historians, and it fundamentally reshaped the American relationship with the land. By 1947, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, the original FIFRA, was passed by Congress, establishing the regulatory framework for pesticide registration and use. This was not, in itself, a malicious document, but what it created, over the following decades, was a system in which the cost of regulatory compliance gave enormous competitive advantage to large chemical corporations. Small-scale botanical solutions, the garlic vinegar soap spray that Amish farmers in Pennsylvania and Ohio had used for generations, did not require registration because they were not commercial products. But by creating an official, government-endorsed pesticide marketplace, the regulatory system effectively told the American consumer that the registered product was the legitimate one and everything else was folk medicine. Think about what that means for a moment. Your grandfather in 1955 probably still knew what old Jacob knew. He may not have called it an Amish recipe. He may have called it something his own father taught him. But the knowledge was still circulating in rural America, passed from neighbor to neighbor, from garden club to kitchen table, from county extension offices that had not yet been fully captured by the chemical company's influence. Then came the 1960s. Then came Earl Butz. If you haven't subscribed yet, take a moment to do it now. We make videos like this every week about the methods the industry buried, the wisdom the Amish kept, and the food independence most Americans gave up without realizing it. Every week is a new piece of something that was taken from you. Subscribing is how you make sure you get it back. Earl Butz served as Secretary of Agriculture under Presidents Nixon and Ford through the early and mid-1970s. His policy philosophy, and this is well documented, not disputed, history was summarized in his now infamous phrase, "Get big or get out." Butz believed that American agriculture's future was industrial-scale production, maximum yield, chemical inputs, and specialization. Under his tenure, federal agricultural policy aggressively pushed farmers toward consolidation, away from diversified small-scale farming, and toward a total dependency on purchased inputs, seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, the small kitchen garden, the diversified orchard, the homestead that produced its own pest control from its own plants. This was not the America that Butz's policy envisioned. It was, however, exactly the America that the Amish communities of Lancaster County, Holmes County in Ohio, and LaGrange County in Indiana were quietly and stubbornly preserving. While American agriculture was being restructured around the requirements of Monsanto, Dow Chemical, and the fertilizer industry, the Amish were still planting the same garlic-bordered orchards their great-grandparents had planted, still mixing the same vinegar sprays their grandmothers had mixed, still producing apple crops and vegetable harvests that would make a modern organic grower weep with envy without a single government-registered pesticide anywhere on the property. A grower in Holmes County, Ohio, a man in his late 70s, whose family has farmed the same land since the 1890s, described the aphid spray to an agricultural researcher this way, according to regional oral history documentation from that county. You make it in the evening, you let the garlic steep through the night, and in the morning, before the sun gets high, you walk the rows and you spray what needs it. By midday, the aphids are gone. You do not need more than that. You do not need anything that comes in a store. This is what the land gives you for growing your own garlic. That is not nostalgia. That is a precise description of a functioning pest management system that costs approximately nothing and leaves no toxic residue on your fruit. Here is the part they really did not want you to know. The average American household with a kitchen garden spends somewhere between $60 and $150 per season on commercial insecticides and pesticides, according to Consumer Gardening Market Research. The national market for residential pesticide products is estimated at over $8 billion annually. Not the agricultural market, the residential market, your garden, your backyard, the aphids on your tomatoes. That is an $8 billion problem that the industry created by making you forget, or by making sure you never learned that a jar of apple cider vinegar, 3 cloves of garlic, a teaspoon of dish soap, and a quart of water does the same job for less than $1 and change. The garlic spray formulation that the Amish communities of Pennsylvania and Ohio have used for generations is not complicated. It is not secret in the way that a proprietary chemical formula is secret. It never was. The Amish did not hide it. They simply continued practicing it, while the rest of America was told, loudly and expensively, that the modern way was the only way. Raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar, the kind with the mother intact, because the organic acids in an unfiltered vinegar are more complex and more effective than the pasteurized variety. 4 to 6 crushed garlic cloves, steeped in 2 cups of water for a minimum of 12 hours. A teaspoon of pure liquid soap, not a synthetic detergent, but a soap with actual fatty acid content, which is why the Amish specifically preferred lard-based soap and why a Castile soap is the closest modern equivalent. Combine the strained garlic water with a cup of the vinegar, the soap, and enough clean water to fill a 1-quart spray bottle. Shake it. Apply it in the early morning or late evening when the temperature is below 80 degrees, because heat volatilizes the allicin quickly and you want it to stay on the leaf surface long enough to do its work. Spray the undersides of leaves directly. The results on aphid colonies, the kind that can strip a young apple tree of its new growth, or collapse. A tomato plant that should have been producing for another 6 weeks have been consistent across every account from Amish agricultural communities that has been documented. Not overnight improvement, immediate improvement. The aphids do not migrate. They die where they are, or they abandon the plant entirely within the same application day. This is a function of the combined mechanism, the allicin acting on the nervous system, the acid disrupting cellular osmosis, the surfactant penetrating the waxy cuticle. 3 points of attack, all from ingredients that cost almost nothing, all derived from plants that the Amish themselves grow on the same land they are trying to protect. Now close the loop that was opened at the beginning of this video. The one ingredient that modern chemistry has never been able to replicate synthetically for sale at a profit is the allicin in fresh garlic. Not because the chemistry is beyond them, because allicin degrades within hours of being produced. It is biologically active precisely because it is unstable. A synthetic version stable enough to be bottled, shipped, and stored on a shelf for 18 months would require chemical modification that would destroy the very properties that make it effective. The Amish spray works because it is made fresh, used immediately, and applied directly. There is no supply chain, there is no shelf life, there is no margin. And that is exactly why there is no commercial version of it. Think about that for a moment. The one attribute that makes this spray undeniably effective, its freshness, its instability, its need to be made in your own kitchen and walked out to your own garden, is also the attribute that makes it completely unsellable. The industry cannot package and monetize something that requires you to be the one who makes it. And so instead of acknowledging that this centuries-old Amish formulation works, the industry built a regulatory, marketing, and retail infrastructure designed to make you feel that reaching for a bottle of something with a safety warning on the label was the responsible, modern, adult thing to do. Your grandfather, if he was gardening in rural Pennsylvania or Ohio or Indiana in the 1940s and 1950s, almost certainly knew a version of this spray. It may not have come to him from an Amish neighbor directly, but the knowledge was in the culture. It was in the extension pamphlets of the 1930s and early 1940s, before the chemical industry captured the extension service. It was in the kitchen notebooks that farm wives kept. It was in the oral tradition of every rural community that had been gardening self-sufficiently since before World War I. That knowledge did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because a very profitable system had every incentive to replace it with something you could not make yourself. What does it say about America that we accepted that trade? What does it say that a country founded on the principle of self-sufficiency, on the dignity of the man who grows his own food, protects his own land, and answers to no corporation for his daily bread, quietly, over the span of 2 or 3 generations, handed the keys of the garden to an industry that profits from our ignorance of what our grandparents already knew? The Amish of Lancaster County, Holmes County, and LaGrange County did not accept that trade, not because they were backward, not because they were resistant to all change, but because within their community, the knowledge was never allowed to become the exclusive property of a corporation. A 73-year-old Amish farmer in Wayne County, Ohio, spraying his apple trees before dawn with a formula his grandfather described to him when he was 8 years old, is not a relic. He is a demonstration. He is proof that the method works, that it has always worked, and that the only thing standing between you and the same result is a little knowledge and a little time the night before. You do not need to buy anything new. You need to remember something old. Grow a row of garlic, and if you are already growing garlic, you already have the hardest ingredient to find. Keep a bottle of raw apple cider vinegar on your shelf. Get yourself a bar of Castile soap, or a bottle of liquid Castile. The next time you walk your tomatoes or your apple trees, and you find the undersides of the leaves shining with the dark, sticky residue that aphid colonies leave behind, you will know exactly what to do. And you will know why it works, not because someone told you to trust the label, but because you understand the mechanism, the allicin, the acid, the surfactant, the direct disruption of a soft-bodied insect's ability to breathe and regulate its own body chemistry. Before this video ends, here is a question that belongs in the comments. Did your grandfather or your grandmother ever use a homemade spray in the garden? Something mixed up from kitchen ingredients, something they called by a name you might not have understood as a kid? Leave that memory below. We genuinely want to know. Because those memories are documentation. They are living evidence that this knowledge was wider than we have been told. Leave a comment below and tell us what your grandfather grew in his garden, or what your family lost when the supermarket replaced the root cellar. We read every single one. If this video opened your eyes, give it a like. And if you have a friend or a neighbor who is out there buying bottles of insecticide every season for a problem that a garlic clove and a jar of vinegar could solve, share this with them. Not as a curiosity, as a courtesy. Because the knowledge that the industry buried did not belong to the industry. It belonged to all of us, and the only way to take it back is to pass it on. The Amish never stopped spraying their orchards in the early morning with what their grandparents mixed in wooden buckets. They never stopped, because they never forgot what it was for. It was not for the market, it was for the food. And there is a version of America, not a radical version, not a fringe version, but an older and more honest version, where that distinction was the most important one.